about two things for the next 5 or 10 minutes. I want to talk about the Trojan horse. What is the Trojan horse? Well, I was watching again, I've watched this film before, and I watched it again by a top academic called Tim Holland, who did a documentary a few years ago called The Untold Story about Islam. And basically, I know from a scholar who's told me this privately, who's told me this, that basically he put Tim Holland onto doing research on this topic. And this scholar that I know gave to Tim Holland a lot of research, a lot of information of new scholarship on Islam, so that he could do his documentary and write his book. So anyhow, Tim Holland went off and did that. He actually made that his next project, looking at the rise of Islam and trying to get this scholarship out to the public eye. A result of which he made a documentary and trying to bring to light this new scholarship, but in a very gentle way, that the new scholarship about Islam is showing that Islam, for the first 100 years, there is no record of in any source whatsoever. The earliest record that we have of Islam is 100 years later, and it's a coin with the name Muhammad on it. But even the language, it could be seen not as Muhammad, so even that is controversial. But even if we allowed that, it's only 100 years after Muhammad's life, so-called, that we get any concrete evidence of his existence. And so Tim Holland was bringing to light these kind of questions about Islam. So it came, Tim Holland, then, this is all, he explains this, I'll tell you the detail anyway. Anyhow, this is all from Tim Holland telling me this as well. Not telling me personally, but telling us this in a live discussion that he had. He actually tells you the story as well of this next bit that I'm going to tell you. So basically, they were going to have a press release and release the documentary, or talk about the documentary. And he was inviting academics and MPs and the press and whatever. And basically, he got so many threats that the police said to him, you can't do this because we can't guarantee your safety. So basically, Tim Holland was not free to be able to discuss with academics and MPs about his own documentary. But to top it all, the Channel 4 got so much flack that they've actually closed down the documentary. It was on YouTube channel and now it's not there. I had to get the documentary on Vimeo by someone who copied it and then uploaded it. But the Trojan horse is this. This is the Trojan horse. That even now, operating in the academic world in the West, there is pressure from Islamic fundamentalists on academic freedom. That the Western culture is not being given this new scholarship that completely destroys and exposes Islam. And on the one hand, we have a Western culture that says free love, gay rights, and all the rest of it. And yet at the same time, we have a culture where academic freedom has been curtailed. And personally, I think that is totally shocking. There are over 40 million Muslims in Europe. Well, if academic freedom is curtailed now, what's it going to be like in 10 years' time? I think atheists and Christians are dealing with the wrong enemy. I think that the enemy is within. I think the enemy is Islamic fundamentalism. I love Muslims. I respect you as Muslims. I got total respect for you. But when you curtail academic freedom, then you get me angry. People have a right, whether they're atheists, whether they're Christians, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Jew, whether they're Hindu, whether they're Satanist, whether they're gay, whatever. Everybody has a right in academic freedom to question and to think. It's an absolute right, I believe. And for Islamic fundamentalists to threaten people and to say you can't bring out a documentary or to threaten a top academic, and then for the West not to actually kick up a fuss about it and say, well, hang on a minute, this is not right, to me is disgraceful, and it's really, really, really worrying. It really is worrying, for democracy is not healthy if a top academic like Tim Holland can be silenced like that. I mean, he was saying that he was really, really frightened of actually pushing. I mean, his main evidence that that Muhammad actually existed, he said, I could only find after 100 years after Muhammad, and it was a coin. So some scholar in the audience said, yeah, but on that coin there is a picture of a Persian king. And we all know that when there were pictures of Persian kings, that meant polytheism. And Tim Holland said, yeah, well, I know I was a bit weak. I wanted to say more, but I couldn't say more. I was only asking questions. In other words, Tim Holland couldn't put what he fully wanted on the documentary because he felt that there would have been such a backlash that he couldn't do that. And I think it's really, really disgraceful that a top academic like that doesn't feel free to be able to say what he wants. It's just disgraceful. He should be allowed to say what he wants. If he doesn't agree with Islam, or if he doesn't agree with Christianity, if he doesn't agree, then he has a right to disagree. If that's the way he thinks, if that's what he thinks academically, then he has a right to do that. And I think as Muslims that you've got it all wrong. I know it's not all Muslims, but basically you can't stop academic freedom. If people want to be academic and want to go into avenues of research that you are not happy with, so what? If that's what they want to do, then they have a right to do that. If scholars want to spend their time talking about the Gnostic Gospels, and that's what they want to do, and they don't want to talk about the four Gospels, then I might get upset about it, but the only way I'm going to deal with them is I've got to write books about the four Gospels, and I've got to challenge the academics on the Gnostic Gospels. But it's no good me pulling my hair out and saying, oh, they're writing books about the Gnostic Gospels and threaten them. You can't do that. It's not right. It's really, really bad. It's really, really wrong. And I'm angry about it. I'm angry that a top academic has been silenced by Muslim extremists. And I'm angry at the fact that our British government, and I'm angry at the fact of Channel 4, and I'm angry at the fact of the press, haven't got the balls to stand up to Islamic extremists in our country. In the time of Prohibition, when J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the law enforcement in America, when he was faced with the mafia gun running and doing all the rest, J. Edgar Hoover waged war on them and went after them and rooted them out. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of jihadists in our country. And that is a fact. The CIA, MI5, law enforcement agencies in America all know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of jihadists in the UK. It's a known fact. Even the BBC have done, the wishy-washy BBC have done documentaries where they traced it. They have traced young men, British men leaving the UK, going to Pakistan, being trained by Al-Qaeda, and then going to fight in Africa, in jihadist fights there, and jihadist fights in Syria. Then they come back to the UK. And these are the kind of people that are in our country, and that when Tim Holland, a top academic, criticises Islam, those are the kind of people that are phoning up or sending Twitter messages threatening him and threatening people like him who want to speak out and say what they want to say. And unless the government of our country wages war on these jihadists, roots them out, and deports them, or if you can't deport them, arrest them and put them in prison, no young British person should be allowed to go to Pakistan, train in a Al-Qaeda terrorist war camp, and then go to Syria, fight a war there, and come back to the UK and not be arrested. If that happens, and you know about it, they should be arrested. But no, this namby-pamby British government knows there are thousands of these young men in our country and doesn't do a thing about it. And all the time, you got these top liberal politicians and these top liberal flipping journalists who kiss the backside of these Islamic fundamentalists in the UK, giving our social policy, giving the policy to the police, giving the policy to the law courts. We had an Archbishop of Canterbury who at one time said that that Sharia law should be accepted in the UK. What kind of a planet are we on? What kind of a planet are we on? We've allowed the enemy to come in. We've allowed a Trojan horse in Western culture that is going to destroy Western culture because it's fascist. We've allowed fascists into our nation. That's what we've allowed, fascists. And nobody's saying anything about it. Nobody's doing anything about it. And then we have fascists that went and killed one of our soldiers in broad daylight, cut his head off and killed him, and nobody is doing anything about it. Because we're supposedly all cultural and tolerant. Well, I don't tolerate Islamic extremism. I don't tolerate the Al-Qaeda in the Britain. I don't agree with it. And neither should you.